Welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Ryan Verdon. I'm the founder and director of Lear Cultural Coaching. You can find out more about me and more about Lear by checking out the website. This is a very special edition of Learning with Lear. We are going to be talking about the debate that happened last night. It was the second presidential debate of the 2024 election. Obviously, though, it was a special one because in between the first and the second one, Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Vice President Harris became the Democratic nominee. And so, in a lot of ways, it was heightened. It was the first time that the country got to see Kamala Harris against Donald Trump and put them back to back, juxtapose them, make a decision about what they were going to do, and see where they differed. Um, and of course, today, lots of people are talking about it. Last night, pundits, we're talking about it. I've heard all kinds of takes, and I think it's important that I offer uh, an analysis and a framework that folks can use because the way that I've heard people talk about it is frustrating. It's disingenuous in a lot of ways, and it's cynical at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is Kamala Harris was talking about, and I thought she did this well, was saying like Donald Trump isn't talking about you, isn't thinking about you, and that's very true. He most certainly is not. But in a lot of ways, neither is Vice President Harris, neither is Kamala Harris. And I'm saying that as somebody who uh thinks that Kamala Harris is the choice to make. Um I'm not a Democrat, for those of you that are like, "Wait, hold up, what's going on?" I'm not a Democrat. But I think the choice is very clear between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Which one deserves our vote strategically, if that's how you're going to do. I'm not here to tell anybody how to vote. I'm just saying if you're choosing between those two, Donald Trump should not get your vote. Donald Trump should not get your vote, right? But I want to talk about what would it have looked like. What can we imagine from our politic? And not a lot of people are doing that, right? Oftentimes people will say, well, this is no major political party candidate is going to talk about those things. And then they move on and they don't actually name those things. And that's true, right? That's pragmatic. And there's a space for that. But I also think there needs to be a space for imagination. And that's what I want to offer here. And so let's jump into it. I don't have no guests this week. I don't have anything like that. Have some really bomb conversations previously. Make sure you check those out on the channel. Um, but I want to talk about this debate, right? And so the first thing that I want to talk about is what I was struck by, and what underlies uh, the this particular election cycle, which is going to be identity, right? Not that it doesn't underlie everything, but when you're talking about two white men, uh, identity should come into play, but not in the same way that it's going to come into play here, where you have Donald Trump, cis hetero, white male, wealthy, all the things that he is, going against a biracial woman, right? Black and Indian woman. Uh, and the way identity plays out is obvious in those ways, right? We have Donald Trump's explicit racism, his inability to understand that Kamala Harris is both black and Indian. Um, and then you had last night his what I believe is patriarchy, in the way that he would not look at her, would not engage with her, the way that he not last night but repeatedly has mispronounced her name on purpose, and we know it's on purpose because when he doesn't think anybody's watching, when he doesn't is not performing for the camera, he can say her name correctly, right? And let's be clear, it's Kamala. We need to be able to say that. I was watching, a clip came up on YouTube. Pierce Morgan was talking to some Republican representative. I forgot who it was. And he kept mispronouncing Vice President Harris's name. Kamala is what he kept saying. And nobody corrects. He didn't correct him. And I think that there's something to that, right? But that's not even the patriarchy that I want to talk about. I want to talk about the patriarchy that creates and informs what's possible and how that was manifest in the debate, right? So right away, you have Donald Trump refusing to shake hands. I don't know if people haven't talked about that. I think it was Jake Tapper last night was like, "Oh, this awkward beginning of the debate." We need to call what happened what it is, and it was sexist and it was patriarchal. Donald Trump was not going to shake hands with Kamala Harris and introduce himself. Uh, Vice President Harris walked all the way over to Donald Trump and introduced herself, said Kamala Harris. Uh, and that's bogus. That's petty. That's childish. But it's also sexist. And we're gonna have plenty of opportunities to look at the role of gender and patriarchy and toxic masculinity in the next 50 plus days. I think it's 55 or 54 days before the election, depending on when you're watching this. And so we're gonna have opportunities for this, and we need to start doing that now. So let's start with that, right? Like, so there's that. He would not do that if that was a white male that was there. If that was Joe Biden, he shook his hand. If that was Al Gore or John Kerry, he wouldn't have done that if that was Barack Obama. Let's be clear. That was a gendered thing. Um, but that's not even what I'm talking about, right? The whole premise of that people are talking about is, oh, look at how uh Kamala looked presidential. She made a concerted effort to try to double down on how powerful the military is going to be under her, how lethal the military is. And that wasn't just in this debate. That was also in her speech at the DNC, right? Um and she continued to call him weak, said that he was a clown, said that world leaders were going to eat him for lunch. And this is not a defense of Donald Trump, right? Because Trump answers back with toxic masculinity, gets his ego gets hurt, so he starts talking about the crowd size, and he starts saying all kinds of wild things and calling her a liar and all the disrespectful things that we expect from Donald Trump. And but we oftentimes, I think, folks on the left don't expect it from, or didn't expect it from, Kamala Harris. Uh, and I don't know why that's the case. We should, because that's empire is built on patriarchy, on toxic masculinity. And so it was really disturbing to me to hear all the talk about how we're gonna be strong, we're gonna be we are not to be messed with. My military is gonna be the biggest. Nobody's gonna mess with me when I'm there. Trump talking about no Putin and Zelensky and Netanyahu, how they didn't do anything when they were when he was in office. All of that is rooted in toxic masculinity and patriarchy. It's rooted in disease and disconnection, and it's important that we talk about that, right? Because there isn't a world that is peaceful that comes from springing from toxic masculinity or that type of patriarchy. Um, again, I understand why Kamala Harris needs to do that, needs to show up like that. Because had she not shown up like that, then there would be, oh, look at how soft she is. We can't have a woman be commander in chief and all that. But we never talk about, or not um in that type of arena, right? We have not created the space to talk about what that means, the militarism, the hyper masculinity, the obsession with being strong and dominant, as if that is the way. That dominant means physical force, physical domination. And I think that that's a problem. Um, and it becomes especially problematic when we start to talk about some of these other identities that are at play, right? And the way that if might justifies right, then the way privileged groups can justify their privilege and their higher rank over oppressed groups, marginalized groups, right? Um, and so that's something that I want to start with, is that I'm really sitting with what role patriarchy plays, and particularly what role I play as a white male in disrupting that and saying like, yo, what are we doing, right? And so let's be clear. Let's actually talk about this. What do I mean by that? Why is that important? It's because all this talk about our military and how we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, and I'm not to be messed with, and we're NATO and the military alliance, and how we need to be strong like that. It obscures. We never talk about how much money we are spending on weapons of war. Our military budget is astronomical. Our defense budget is astronomical. It's more than the next like dozen or so countries combined, and most of them are our allies, right? So like it rhetorically justifies this prioritization of spending money and resources and time on militarism, on death, on war. That's not good for humanity. That's not good for us as a country, right? And that leads to the other thing I want to talk about. The first question, or one of the next thing I want to talk about, I should say. The first question was about the economy. And y'all, I was sitting in a hotel room. I was out in Denver on a contract, and me and my coworker were sitting there uh watching the debate, eating dinner, and my head, I swear you could see it explode. You could see it explode, you could see the steam. And it doesn't, I don't know why I'm surprised by this, and I'm not surprised, but I still get very upset. Um the way we talk about the economy is so inept. It is so disconnected from what actually matters to American families, to any families, right? Across the world. And so I want to talk about that because class never enters in any real way into our conversations. Class never enters. Matter of fact, we see poor people, and in our heads, the story we tell about poor people is that they deserve it, that they did something, that if they would just work harder, they could get more. That is the dominant narrative from both parties. And so there's really no discernible difference between economic policies between in terms of what where Republicans and Democrats traditionally have been. I think there is a discernible difference between giving tax cuts to the richest, right, and lowering the tax rate and all that. But again, um, most of that doesn't actually impact working families, even if when we talk about taxing corporations or raising the this or that, and we never actually get to what's a real livable wage. Matter of fact, they were clowning student loan forgiveness yesterday. Donald Trump tried to clown that, and Kamala Harris didn't say anything to that. Didn't bug back at him. Didn't say anything. Right. That's how far away from anything resembling economic justice we are in the public discourse. Right. So what would a conversation about the economy have actually looked like? One, we have to stop talking about GDP like that matters to most people in the stock market. Most people don't give a shit about the GDP or the stock market. What they care about is how much their life costs, how much it costs to put gas in their car, how much it costs to feed their families, what rent is. Now, Kamala Harris said rent is way too high, housing is way too high, but then notice she didn't say anything else about it. They just acknowledged this shit is way too high. It's too much. But there was never any real pushback to say, so let's measure our economic health by how much money workers are making, by how livable our world is, right? Those are never the things that people talk about. So why does that matter? Is because today I was again watching, I forget which talking head, which pundit was saying this, but was like, actually, it's the economy is at historic highs right now. It's a misnomer. It's false. It's a lie. Another one of Donald Trump's lies, that the economy is not doing well in the Biden administration. Now, they cherry picked stats, they did all this, and that's true. But the reality is, everybody knows that the cost of living is high. Everybody knows that inflation was crazy. But what we don't talk about is inflation has outpaced wages for decades. Democrat and Republican administrations have allowed this to happen. right? Even Donald Trump tried to say, "Oh, inflation was zero during his administration." One, that's not true. But because most of the time, good inflation is like 3%, 3 to 5%, and cost of living. If you're lucky enough to work at a job that gives cost of living raises, it's like 2.75% is a good one. Um, Teachers are still broke. Definitely workers, labor is still getting exploited. None of those things enter into the conversation. So where's our imagination? What are we talking about when we talk about the economy? um and more than that, we talk, and then we allow, because we're so caught up on that, we actually allowed both of these two people to talk about fossil fuels like they're not killing us. Trump was actually talking about pipelines, and Kamala Harris said, "Oh, we're boosting our oil production," as if we're not in one of the every year is the hottest year on record, as if we're Arizona isn't on like a billion days over 100 consecutively, as if the world is not on fire, as if wildfires and hurricanes and tropical storms and famine and all the things that we know are linked to climate change aren't happening. That is asinine. That is asinine. And the reason that they're allowed to do that is through an economic argument. They're allowed to say, hey, gas is cheaper because we produced oil. It's cheaper. The cost of living is cheaper because energy and gas is not. One, that's not true. Um, that's dishonest, right? And the because gas, it's not cheaper, right? It's a lot. It costs a lot. Um, but more than that, it plays games with our future. How much is it going to cost to rebuild whole cities that burn down or flood because of the storms? How much is it going to cost for food when we don't have any arable land left, right? What is it going to cost in the terms of families who suffer loss when from preventable deaths because we have not taken seriously the cost of climate change, the cost of continuing to exploit labor and exploit people? That's really what we need to talk about when we're talking about economic health. We need to talk about those things. And the reality is, this would not be hard for Democrats to do if they were truly left. It would not be hard. They could say, hey, y'all are worried about your jobs. We're going to have good paying jobs in clean energy. Trump actually got to clown solar. This type of madness cannot be acceptable. It cannot be acceptable. And our public discourse have moved so right. It's always been right when it comes to the economy and class, but it's moved so far right that now Democrats are like, no, 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 we're gonna get oil, we're gonna do all these things too, basically giving up on our future. And that is why the largest voting bloc remains non-voters. Young people are not going for that. This generation is not going for that, and good for them. They shouldn't. We shouldn't either. My generation, I'm 40, so if you're 40, like, no, get with the young people. But more than that, even like our parents and all that, we need to say, hey, this was not the business. Invest in clean energy. The Green New Deal hasn't even come up. How far have we gone? We had a moment where we might have been able to go left, and now it's just gone. Right? It doesn't even come up. Right? And we spend all our time and energy talking about the military and spending money on the military instead of people, and we allowed some of the actual policies that would help real people, real families, completely escape the public discourse. And the reason we did this, I think, has a lot to do with our racial politic, right? Because we are unwilling through our and we, by we right now I mean white anti-racist folks on the left, oftentimes are unwilling to go talk to uh conservative folks, right-leaning folks, potentially Trump supporters. We are unwilling because of a racial politic and a sensibility, which I understand. Again, don't get me wrong, I understand. I'm not saying we need to go buddy up with racists, but I think we have to have an anti-race. As you know, if you're watching this, we have to have an anti-racism that allows us to build with that allows us to show, hey, actually, this is not good. Donald Trump doesn't care about you. um and the only thing that's connecting, that's tethering you to Trump and Trumpism is racism. And we've seen that through the rhetoric on immigration. This man actually said that Haitian immigrants are eating dogs and cats. And I know the internet is ablaze with memes and jokes about that. And I laughed at a couple, but there's some real racist shit behind that, that we can't just make a joke about that, right? That is a really, really, really racist thing. It's a mindset. It's historically been used to mark other people. And then again, in one of these shows, I think this one was on Piers Morgan. This dude was talking about, oh yeah, well the point is that the point he was trying to make is that the Biden Harris administration, Kamala Harris, has allowed hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Haiti, a country that's a failed state and that has rampant cannibalism. This is what people really think about Haiti and about people, and it's bold faced lies that is used to scare other white folks or to connect to poor white folks, to say, look at, let's be in this together, right? Building community around whiteness and keeping them saying, oh yeah, now let's pump oil. Oh yeah, now let's spend 80 cents of every dollar in taxes on the military, and let's go kill brown people. Oh, and by the way, ignore the genocide that's happening, which again, the came up in the debate. And it was so ahistorical because Kamala Harris actually said, well, let's go back to the beginning. And you know where she started at? October 7th. Now, I've said this before, and I've caused slack for this. I've lost contracts, all that. October 7th was terrible. Anti-Semitism is unacceptable. And you cannot use anti-Zionism to mask anti-Semitism. And does that happen? Sure. Is that what's happening most of the time? Absolutely not. Right. And you certainly can't say, let's start at the beginning and then start at October 7th. Like there hasn't been an occupation. Like Palestinians have not been oppressed. Like Israel doesn't control the air, the land, and the sea of Gaza. These things cannot be allowed to happen in an honest democracy. They cannot be allowed to happen from people who say they're progressives or for people who say they care about humanity. And the only reason that they're allowed to happen is because the right utilizes identity politics and then uh, points at the left to say y'all are doing it, which is why, and we bought that, which is why the only when race did come up, notice that nobody said anything about Donald Trump and the racist attacks on the immigrants. Nobody, Kamala Harris didn't once say, wow, that's really racist that you're talking like that, that these people are invading, that all that. What she said when directly asked about race was that Americans are tired of being divided. And you know what? She's not wrong. I said that today on TikTok. I did, what do they call that? Do you put out a TikTok? I don't know what it is. Whatever. I did a TikTok post, and you may have saw it on the gram. But it talked about, I said, she's not wrong. We are absolutely tired of being divided. I go across the country giving talks, leading workshops, talking to people in right-wing states and very progressive states, and in battleground states, purple states. I'm in Georgia right now, right? Um, and the one thing that I do believe is that most people are very, very tired of being divided, and most people are not bigots, right? But the reality is we are not dealing with what is actually dividing us. What is dividing us is whiteness, and whiteness has been used to justify an oppressive economic system, capitalism, right? Um, and then we have patriarchy, which undergirds all this and says the only way you can be a leader is through physical domination. It was gender identity is also very part and parcel of racial identity and of class identity, right? That's why a lot of people, like working class white folks, like where I'm from, it would, especially men, you don't have economic power, you don't have political power, but you do have physical power. So we scrap it out often, right? And we also see in Hollywood and in movies and stuff, physical domination is the pinnacle of like Americanness with the frontier, with gangsters, with all that. Physical domination and masculinity is tied to masculinity, and masculinity is tied to the ideal American in a way that is uh poisonous. It's bad for us. All of this is bad for us. And the fact that none of this, just plain, this is plain. You don't need to be a policy wonk. This isn't, the details of these things are important, and they're complex, and they require sophistication and study and all that. But the general principles are not hard. It is not hard. It would not be hard for Kamala Harris to say, yo, y'all can talk about GDP. You could talk about this, but inflation was real. And inflation happened because corporations raised prices because they knew they had a friend in the White House in Donald Trump. That's why that happened, is because corporations are greedy. Rich people are greedy. That's why this happens. People are greedy. And we need to do something ideologically, rhetorically, culturally about greed, about othering. And when we want to turn the page, it wasn't just on Trump. It's not on that man. It's on that line of thought. That is what we need to turn the page on. And it's going to happen when we on the left realize that we have to offer healing, and we have to stand firm on that, and make pragmatic choices. I'm not saying, like, again, I'm not telling you to vote for Kamala. If you're a third party voter, if you're that, I get it. I'm not shaming nobody. Don't vote for Trump. That's what I'm saying. I hope nobody watching this votes for Trump. Um, and we need to recognize our need for healing collectively, and be catalysts for that as we think about what's possible in 2028. Because we can't have this lower bar in 2028. We can't have talks about the economy and not talk about wages, not talk about student loan debt, not talk about um the military budget, right? We can't have uh basically the conversation about the military be who's going to be the biggest, baddest bully in the world, who's going to kill the most people. That's absurd. That's not a world I want to live in, right? And I don't think it's a world y'all want to live in either. We can't continue to say uh we want to be united, so let's not talk about the realities of being divided around race, right? We can't continue to do that. We have to heal. For white men out there watching this, I'm particularly talking about us. We need to heal. We need to realize that the initial wound is happened to us when we accepted the toxic masculinity that is tied to whiteness. uh we got wounded by that. We have to heal that. When we heal that, we can see clearly that capitalism is not getting us where we need to go, right? That economic justice looks like a communal economics, right? Providing the essentials of life for everybody. um and that's when we'll be able to start to really see something that resembles justice on the horizon. I pray for that day. I know y'all are praying for that day. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What were your takeaways from the debate? What questions do you have? Feel free to email. Again, follow the channel, subscribe to the channel. It's very much appreciated. Follow me on socials, all that. I always appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Love all of y'all. Peace.